I've missed so much time, and I want to be a part of her life. What do I do?
Get an apartment, get a job, pay child support. And then we will talk about visitation, I promise. You're her hero, Scott. Just be the person that she already thinks you are.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where each week we enter the world of a great film. We explore its themes, the history, the filmmaking, and the influence it has on us today. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Rocha. I'm a writer, producer, host, and voiceover artist here in San Diego, California.
And the reason that John and I can be here together doing these podcasts is because of your incredible support on patreon.com/thecine-files, as well as Apple Podcasts. And while you're there, you can listen to ad-free versions of the show. Of course, our Cine-Files shorts. Little spoiler alert, we just recorded one on the film Sinners, which I think is a great conversation. And the only way to hear that is either by subscribing through Apple Podcasts or patreon.com/thecine-files.
Absolutely. Another way you can support the show, and we really would appreciate it if you did, is when you listen to our commercials that go on through the show. We would love it if you supported us by trying out some of the products and the things that they have there from these different people that support our show, different clients, different businesses that support our show. Some really great products that they offer. So use our code when you try this stuff out, because it makes them want to come back and keep supporting the show for many months afterwards. So thanks.
And we are now returning to the MCU. And as we said, we announced several years ago, we're going to go through these films on their 10th anniversary. And for movies we like Ant-Man, we're going to do the full Cine-Files treatment. And for movies that we like, maybe less, like the Avengers Age of Ultron, we're going to handle them in different ways. And so in this case, for Avengers Age of Ultron, the only way you can hear us talk about it is by going to patreon.com/thecine-files, where we will be doing a watch along. So you're going to get our commentary track on Avengers Age of Ultron, which should be a lot of fun. But today we're talking about the 12th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that is Ant-Man. John, how did you first come to this film?
I have to believe that I came to this film with everyone from our crew going to see it on opening weekend. This is just about the time when I'm walking into this career I've had for the last 10 years of podcasts and being on shows. 2015. This is the year where everything changed in my life, going through a breakup and then stumbling into this career that I have now. But I still think this was a time when I was going to see these films opening weekend with friends when we had 70 tickets and what have you. So I remember seeing this one. I think we actually went on a Saturday to see this one, and I remember thoroughly enjoying it, having such a great time with it, and it being such a breath of fresh air in the Marvel Universe, as we had gone through 7 years of movies by this point. And this one was a nice palate cleanser and a great reintroduction to the comedic greatness and the warmth that is Paul Rudd when he is the lead of a movie and a movie is good. You get to really highlight how great he is. And personally, for me, I've always had a thing about the Pyms in the comic books. And so I was curious to see how they were going to do Hank Pym. And having Michael Douglas, who is a crotchety old fart anyway, play Hank Pym, I thought was fantastic for me to be excited about it. And we had Evangeline Lilly, who had really made her name on Lost. So there were a lot of positive things going around this movie before it even came out. So yeah, I remember watching it and just having such a great time with it. What about you?
You know, it's so weird. Most of the time, I can totally remember where I saw almost every movie. I'm not 100% sure. This is in the era. So my son is about he's 3 years old. So we weren't going out that much at this time.
Right.
I feel like Karen and I maybe snuck out to see it as a matinee, but I'm not really sure. But I am sure of everything you said. Paul Rudd is a delight. In fact, everyone in this movie is kind of a delight. And it's just a totally enjoyable. And it's funny. The last MC movie we did was Guardians of the Galaxy, which I adore. And I think and before that we had Captain America, the Winter Soldier. So I really think that Marvel at this moment, we went from spy thriller to wacky teen group. And now we go into Ant-Man and it's like, oh, Marvel's really firing on all cylinders at this moment.
Considering how Marvel is now.
Yeah.
And of course, we're here right after post Thunderbolts, which a lot of people enjoyed, including me. And did you get a chance to see
me
that?
too.
Yeah, and Steve. So we're hoping that Marvel may be finding a new second wind or third wind or fourth wind, even depending on how you look at it, with Thunderbolts, hopefully with Fantastic Four, and then maybe with Avengers Doomsday by the time it comes out, supposedly in May of next year. But this is you're such so right, Steve. This is the Marvel sweet spot right now. 2015, everyone's really excited. You know, it occurred to me as I was rewatching the film in preparation for our discussion, like, I remember when you were excited to see the chances that Marvel was taking. Ooh, Ant-Man? Ooh, what are you going to do with Ant-Man? Now, Marvel, unfortunately, is at the whim of like, all right, impress me. You know, let's step up to the plate here. What can you do? And it's a shame to see that that's the attitude now. But maybe if they start to go into a new golden age here of really good product and really good output, we'll come back to that time where you're excited to see what they're going to do next. But yeah, I remember being incredibly excited to see this movie because of Guardians, because of how they handled Captain America. And so you were like, okay, and I know Thor maybe wasn't the best at the time, but how they handled a majority of the characters, it got you excited to see what they were going to do with Ant-Man.
I think Marvel found an amazing balance in this era between filmmakers being creative and kind of forming their own direction, like you see in Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man and Winter Soldier, and furthering the needs of the greater universe. Is that when that balance is working well, then we're pretty good. And I think with, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and with Quantumania, and with all these other projects, with Captain America Brave New World, it's like you can feel most of it is we're trying to plant seeds for other things and service other needs rather than the needs of this particular movie at that time.
Yeah, and it's an interesting end to Phase 2, right? Because Phase 2 was Iron Man 3, Thor: The Dark World, Captain America Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers: Age of Ultron, and Ant-Man. And aside from Guardians and Ant-Man, those other films are pretty dark. Iron Man 3 is Iron Man dealing with PTSD from what happened in New York in the Avengers film. Thor: The Dark World, certainly as its title suggests, is Thor experiencing the death of his mother and what goes on there with this generational thing that could affect Jane. And then you've got Age of Ultron, which is all about Tony still suffering the PTSD and now wanting to create something where he essentially becomes the policeman of the world, where he is in charge of security of the world so that he can explore the threats and use essentially what will become Vision as his personal spy in order to protect the world. And now we have Ant-Man as kind of a palate cleanser here from all this darkness, aside from Guardians, obviously. And so it's an interesting collection of films for a Phase 2 where Marvel is maybe veering into trying to get a little bit more mature in how it's approaching its themes and how it's approaching its stories. Because even Ant-Man has Corey Stoll's character, Yellow Jacket, wanting to create, in essence, a world police force that is on sale to the highest bidder. So it's got a little darkness to it, but all the comedic energy from it is a good way to kind of end Phase 2 after all this darkness as we move into Phase 3 with Civil War.
I think this is one of the things that Hollywood really didn't understand about comic books that obviously the MCU did, and some other movies sometimes do, which is that, particularly when I was a kid, comic books were stupid kid stuff.
Right.
And I think Hollywood kept that attitude for a long time. And they even went, like, the first descriptor on a new superhero story was comic book. And that carried with it its own connotation,
right?
Which is where you and I reading comics in the 80s when Frank Miller and Alan Moore and then later Sandman and all these things came out, we had learned that no, comic books can be totally wacky and silly. They can be super comedic like Justice League International or like those kinds of things. And it can be heavy as hell and really, really serious, like some of the Daredevil books or some of the Vertigo books at DC, we could get more serious. And that comics can do all these different tones because, as Vogel will say a lot on the Geek Buddies, comic books are a medium. Animation is a medium. They're not a genre.
Yeah.
And so, like, at this era in the Marvel universe, we have spy stuff and comedic stuff, and they all have Marvel tone to them to some degree, but they actually can explore different ideas, which I love.
Yeah, for sure.
Would you like to hear some pre-production?
Let's do it. It's a little. It was a little
It's
messy,
crazy.
but yes, yeah, a little crazy.
This is one of those pre-production stories. Let's go back, believe it or not, to the late 80s when Stan Lee was first pitching an Ant-Man movie, and he got pretty far, and there was lots of talk of making it, except that a little movie studio named Disney was making Honey, I Shrunk the Kids at the same time.
Wow.
And that's what torpedoed the Stan Lee Ant-Man movie in the late 80s. Then, and this one is just crazy, and I only know what I'm about to tell you.
Okay.
A well-known radio personality in 2000 wanted the rights to Ant-Man and went into negotiations with Marvel to get it, and that person is Howard Stern.
Oh, yes.
I know nothing else. That is all I know. Like,
Well,
do you know what more about this?
Yes. Well, Howard wanted to do Fart Man. And so he wanted to, in essence, I think, use the Ant-Man construct and what was presented in Marvel as the creation for Fart Man. So he wanted to kind of use a story that had already been laid out in Marvel and just change Ant-Man to Fart Man. And I think that's what he was exploring doing back when Howard was a little less, how we say, civilized and mature as he is now, you know?
So then at this time, we know that all the Marvel rights were spread around over different companies.
Yeah.
And the company that owned the Ant-Man rights was Artisan, which no longer exists.
Oh, yeah.
And this is an Artisan. Went right around when they put out the Punisher movie with Thomas Jane, which is, coincidentally enough, this is actually my first editing job. I don't know if I've ever told you this story.
Oh.
So when I was doing the DVD quality control jobs, our mutual boss, Jeremy, had good contacts with the companies who needed DVDs. And he's talking to someone and they said, oh, we need someone to cut behind the scenes stuff. So I go have a meeting at Artisan and they talk about hiring me to cut behind the scenes and the things. They were in the middle of production on the Punisher. Oh, wow. And they said, well, we want to see if you can edit. And so they handed me a bunch of footage from the Punisher and asked me to cut a behind the scenes for the Punisher movie, which I cut. And then I go into my second meeting where I'm going to show them this thing to prove that I can edit. And they just started talking to me about the next job. And they literally never asked to see the Punisher thing that I think they forgot that they gave it to me. And that's when they hired me to do the behind the scenes for Step in a Liquid, which is the big surfing movie where I cut hours and hours and hours of footage for that.
Holy wait, for what? For the special features or for the film?
I didn't cut the film. I cut all the special. I made all the special features on the disc.
I have that. I have that Blu-ray. I loved that documentary, and I loved the special features. How crazy! I never knew that. Oh wow!
Oh, that's hilarious. No, I cut all those. There is more footage that I made on that disc than the movie. I made over 2 hours of behind the scenes things.
Yeah, there's so much on there. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it was a huge, and that's my first real professional editing job, a Step in a Liquid.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it's so funny, and maybe I'll even throw it up on Patreon. I still have my Punisher behind the scenes that I cut that literally no one has seen. But I had this moment when I know it's a digression, but I had this moment where I was like, I'd worked really hard on it. I really wanted to show it to him, and I realized I already have this job. The only thing that could happen from me showing them this thing is they don't like it and I don't get the job. So I just stuck it back in my bag and no one ever saw it since. Anyway, huge digression, but it's Artisan who owns these rights. And there is a young TV director who's getting a little bit of heat in England. And that guy's name is Edgar Wright. Yeah. And it is actually before he makes Shaun of the Dead. So he's not a household name in any way. But he takes a meeting with Artisan. By the way, it's like the same month, I think, that Kevin Feige got hired. Wow. So they kind of start at the same time, is my understanding. Yeah. He takes a meeting and he says, well, the character I'm really into is Ant-Man. He's a big comic book guy. He had a bunch of John Byrne issues of Ant-Man that are super special to him. He wrote a treatment. They got really excited about it. But it's the moment that Artisan is going, hey, let's go with this, is when Lionsgate buys Artisan. And suddenly all the rights get all messed up. And so this project that they were maybe about to start with in 2003 gets kind of put in the bottom drawer. So what does Edgar Wright do? He goes back to England and he makes Shaun of the Dead, which is a huge hit. So now suddenly, or it's a huge hit for that kind of a movie. Right. And so now suddenly he's a director that's getting a lot of attention. And now the rights are re-solidifying with the MCU under Kevin Feige. Right. And so they call in Edgar Wright to see if he's interested in doing anything with Marvel. He comes into the meeting. Kevin Feige had no idea about Ant-Man, that he had done this Ant-Man treatment. He didn't know that he had met an artisan. He thought that this was his first meeting with the MCU. And so Edgar Wright comes in and goes, hey, yeah, I already kind of did this. I already wrote a treatment. This is what I want to do. They see the Ant-Man pitch. And it was right from the beginning, the idea of combining the Scott Lang character with the Hank Pym character and having the two generations. All that's in Edgar Wright's treatment. And they took a look at it and they go, this sounds fantastic. And so now the pitch that he made for Artisan is now officially, he signs a deal to make this movie, to direct Ant-Man for the MCU. It seems like everything is going to go great.
Yeah, it seems like.
He makes Hot Fuzz next. And that of course is a big hit. And so now it's, my understanding, this is the very first Comic-Con that Kevin Feige and Marvel appeared at. And Edgar Wright is with him on the stage to talk about Ant-Man.
Yeah.
Because this is one of the big things they're going to do with Edgar Wright as the director.
No, I think we were there. I think some of us were there in that hall in 2015 when that whole thing went down. So yeah, just trying to remember in my head. So yeah.
But the thing that happened was that Iron Man wasn't just a hit. It was a monster hit.
Right.
And so because Iron Man is a monster hit, is Feige and Marvel start to go, wait a minute, maybe we really can do the Avengers. Like when they started, it was sort of like, let's just try to get Iron Man out. And maybe we'll try to get Ant-Man out. We'll just get it, because that's what no one had ever, the idea of doing a big team up, that's crazy.
Yeah.
No one's ever done like multiple characters for multiple movies all coming together for a big, that's never happened.
Right.
But now they start to think about it. And because they're thinking more and more about the Avengers, Ant-Man keeps getting kind of pushed aside a little bit because it ceases to be the top priority. So then Wright goes to make Scott Pilgrim. It's 2010. He's delivered his second draft. In 2011, he's delivered his third draft. But now the MCU is full on about the Avengers.
Right.
That's their top priority at this point. It's now been 10 years since he wrote that first treatment, which is just crazy.
Yeah.
And more Marvel wants to do things their way. They have bigger plans. And so now he's written the second draft and the third draft, and now he's starting to get notes. And he gets notes, in particular, he gets notes from Joss Whedon, he gets notes from the board, he gets notes from all sorts of different executives, because can you incorporate this and can you add this? And they want a little more Marvel stuff. It's all the stuff we were talking about at the very beginning, is they're like kind of pushing him. And he is developing World's End, which is the third in that trilogy.
Right.
And they call him up and say, hey, can you shoot some test footage? And so he comes, and with a stuntman, they do some test footage of the shrinking process to see if it's going to work, which I believe showed at another Comic-Con. I don't know if you saw test footage from Ant-Man.
Oh, I don't think I remember, but maybe.
And then this is a bunch of things happen at the same time. One of them, it sounds like he's getting noted to death.
Yeah.
The other thing that happens is that the screenwriter of the Shaun of the Dead trilogy, whose name is Eric Fellner, comes down with cancer.
Oof. And
serious cancer. And Edgar Wright goes to Marvel and Feige and says, listen, I don't know that my screenwriters, I got to make this movie before he dies, basically. He says, we got to go make this right now. And so they had to put Ant-Man, and Marvel was totally cool about it. They said, okay, we'll delay Ant-Man for a year so that you can go off and make World's End, which he does. Unfortunately, Eric Fellner he's in remission. He got treatment and he's okay. Yeah. But so he goes away. And by the time he comes back after World's End, MCU is even more different and bigger because now the Avengers has come out, the biggest movie of all time at that time, I think. And there are lots more notes, but he's in the casting process. The choice, by the way, is between Paul Rudd and Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Ooh.
Which makes perfect sense. I think he'd be great. He doesn't have that same quality as Paul Rudd, but I love him. He's a great actor. Yeah. And we cast most of the other people, and now Edgar Wright is on his fifth draft, trying to incorporate more notes. And it's getting harder and harder to work independently from the Marvel team. And basically what he said, I wanted to do a Marvel movie, but I'm not sure at this point that Marvel wanted to do an Edgar Wright movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think you wanted to do a Marvel movie and they wanted to do an MCU movie. I think those are the two different things there. And in the end, he wasn't a guy that wanted to serve all the masters at the same time that were being created as it got bigger. Yeah.
Exactly. And so this is the moment that's and I've had this exact moment in a different way. Is he's finished his fifth draft, he's turned it in, and Feige comes to him and says, "Hey, what would you think if we had a couple of our people take a pass at the script?" This is a bad moment. I mean, this is a really
Feige is Feige.
yeah. And he says, and Wright says, "Okay." And they do a pass on the script, and he looks at the script and is just, "I'm out." Basically,
Wow.
He's like, "Yeah, we're not on the same page. We don't have the," and it sounds like Marvel and Edgar Wright parted companies in as polite and okay way as you can. It doesn't, I haven't heard, and I'm sure it was hugely upsetting and difficult, but I haven't heard a lot of anger and nastiness.
He's never spoken like, deeply about anger towards Marvel about the situation. It's just, they wanted to make the film he didn't want to make. And so in the end, what can you do? Right. You've got to move on. And I'm sure he was watching from a distance as Marvel became this, or the MCU became this conglomerate, this massive beast. And so at some point there is a director's loss of individuality, which becomes the accusation for Marvel right after this phase, they're just looking for directors that have a name, but that they can mold to do the films that they want to do. And so clearly Edgar is one of the first casualties of that, because he realized he could not do that for them because it would risk his artistic individuality.
Well, and Edgar Wright is a unique director. Yes. I like him a lot, but he's his own thing. He looks at things in his own way.
I think the film would have been a lot drier as opposed to more friendly in some of the comedy and the back and forths, probably.
Right. So what's interesting, I think, is that now, in a weird way, the key figure becomes Paul Rudd. Because he's been cast in the part, and he is the first actor since Edward Norton that that Marvel allowed to write the screenplay. So now Paul Rudd comes on as a writer, and he goes, "Hey, I got a great idea for a director. How about Adam McKay?" Because he had worked with him on Anchorman, and Adam McKay is obviously a very successful comedy director, a very successful director in general. And Adam McKay comes on to write with Paul Rudd. And at first he was going to direct, and then I have heard the story that he went, "I really don't have time to direct this movie. I can do a pass on the script, but I don't have time to direct it." I've also heard the story of he was friends with Edgar Wright, and he felt shitty and didn't want to take Edgar Wright's job.
Yeah, that makes sense. Even someone like Adam McKay can have a little bit of principles in that way.
So Rudd and McKay hole up in houses on the East Coast and the West Coast for like 2 months. And it sounds like from my impression, and I haven't read Edgar Wright's script, but my impression is that structurally it's relatively what Edgar Wright came up with. But a lot of details and characters were developed a little more, plus a bunch more Marvel stuff, like the whole Falcon thing. That's a Paul Rudd, Adam McKay scene. All that stuff is different. They developed Hope's character a little bit more, but mostly they stuck on the structure.
That's good. Well, and also this is the year that Adam McKay brings out The Big Short, 2015. So I imagine
he's busy.
Because that film is monstrous, and I'm sure at some point we'll do that film. But there's a lot in that movie, and I imagine being distracted with Ant-Man could have affected the overall result of that movie. So yeah.
Just thinking like, oh, if we do The Big Short, that means I'm going to have to like read a book on finance so I can understand what the hell's going on. Okay. And then of course we still don't have a director. And so there were a bunch of people that they were thinking about, but finally they bring on Peyton Reed, who had directed Bring It On. And he felt very comfortable at Marvel. So he says, and that he felt that they actually encouraged him to really bring his own style to the film. And principal photography started on August 18th, 2013 in San Francisco.
It's really fascinating with Peyton Reed because I liked Yes Man, but that was
that's him too.
Right. That was 7 years before Ant-Man. The Breakup was a weird film with Vince Vaughn and Jennifer Aniston. Oh. Down with Love is that weird musical from Ewan McGregor. So he is not a director who works a lot, right? I mean, Ant-Man, then Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania is pretty much all we've gotten from Peyton Reed other than TV shows over the last few years. So it's an interesting cat to have be your director of this film. And they clearly felt he had the right like soft touch to bring this thing into port.
I think it's a really, and particularly with Marvel, with the MCU, is that there's this weird thing of like, they have their machine and their machine is really, really good. And so some directors like James Gunn can bring their own individual vision and use the Marvel machine to be successful. Same with Ryan Coogler.
Right.
And then others, it's either like there's this sort of like with Peyton Reed, where it's like, we'll say a lesser director really thrives under these circumstances because he has the machine. And then you have other people who seem to be blunted, like their artistry kind of dims working in the Marvel world. I think.
Certainly, you could look at the Captain Marvel directors who had come in with a lot of independent film pedigree, and I don't think they, were successful overall with Captain Marvel fully, and then weren't asked to return. And Nia DaCosta came in to do the Marvels, which is the sequel. Not a good response from that as well. So, there are some people that can function within that construct and some that can't. It's not judgment in any way, shape, or form, but it may just be that Peyton was a guy who didn't take it all so seriously and was just like, okay, what do you need me to do? All right, I'll make it work. I'll figure it out. I'll put it together. I'll shoot it. There may be a kind of approach you have to take to this kind of thing where you don't take it so personal and you're not caught up in your artistry, right? And I think some of the more artistic filmmakers, if they're not giving a little more license or they're not given a little more license by Marvel, will push up against the parameters and the demands of doing a film like this within the Marvel universe.
It's funny. There's a quote. One of my favorite quotes from Sidney Lumet from his book on directing is, "The job of the director is to get everyone making the same movie." Mm-hmm. And there's a thing that we don't talk about very much, which is tone. Which is movies have a certain tone and some things fit within that tone and some things don't. And it's not that it's not a good choice. I remember when I was in film school, I did a bunch of sitcom classes and my writing teacher is a guy named Sam Denoff. And Sam Denoff created That Girl and he wrote for the Dick Van Dyke Show. And this is one of the great old school comedy writers of all time. And I remember sitting in a writing session with him and I had written a joke. I'm not a very good joke writer, by the way. And I'd written this joke and Sam looked at me and he's like, "That is a great joke. That is the wrong joke for this show." And he was 100% right. The thing I had written was funny, but it actually would have broken the show. And that this is a key thing, is that when you're making a movie, you're making all these choices about costume and lighting and music and pace in the editing and where the camera is and all these things. And all of those are to support a certain tone. And it's really, there are things that you could do that would be a beautiful shot or a great piece of music or a great cut that would be wrong. And so protecting the tone is a really hard thing to do. And when you're watching Captain America, the Winter Soldier, you understand I'm in this 70s spy thriller. Yeah. And it manages to maintain that the whole time. And when you're in the Guardians of the Galaxy, you understand, you feel comfortable. And Ant-Man is the same. They manage to keep this warm, fuzzy, friendly. And I think a lot of it, as you said at the beginning, is Paul Rudd. Yes, is that 100%. It just manages to not mess up. Right. There's one thing in Ant-Man I don't particularly like, which we'll get into, but in general, I would say they get the tone, whether that's Peyton Reed or whether that's Marvel or whether that's where it comes from, I don't know, but they do succeed in this film.
I agree. A quintessential Marvel film. They have good humor mixed in with legitimately high stakes, and they give the proper amount of time to both to establish them both within the film, and neither one undercuts the other, which I think is a very difficult line to walk.
So, John, would you like to get into Ant-Man?
Dun, 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 dun. Yes, let's go.
So we start off, it's 1989, and I didn't know this at first, but now, of course, I know that we're looking at the construction of the building that we will later see in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, where Robert Redford is in charge. That is what's being built when we come in. We see these doors open, we see the big shield seal over the desk, and there is John Slattery playing Howard Stark. Yeah,
of course, we all know from the other Marvel movies, but of course, Mad Men, which, as we're recording this, AMC has been running a massive marathon of Mad Men over and over and over again. So I've been catching random episodes from different seasons and falling back in love with that show and John Slattery's performance. And of course, Slattery is one of these just incredible character actors that have worked for decades in numerous projects. And he's such a great choice for the older Howard Stark, because we know Dominic Cooper played him as a young man in the Iron Man and other MCU projects.
I think what we'll see throughout this movie is that they do really well the thing that we've complained about a lot in modern Marvel, which is connecting it to the rest of the MCU and the rest of the world and planting little details that are important. But this movie does it in a way that I never feel is taking me out of the film.
Yeah, right. Great point. Great point, man.
And in walks a young Michael Douglas. And naturally, this is 2014, 15 as they're making this. This is the beginning of sort of the de-aging stuff that we're seeing more and more.
Right.
I think they were very nervous about it. It was done by shooting older Michael Douglas, with dots all over his face.
Yeah.
And then they did the whole scenes with a young body double. And the company that did this is the same company that did Skinny Steve in Captain America, the First Avenger.
Oh.
And personally, I think it's incredibly successful.
I agree. 100% agree.
You're supposed to be in Moscow.
I took a detour.
And slams this red vial on the desk. And another MCU person we now see that's here is Haley Atwell, because here is the sort of the middle-aged Peggy Carter.
And this is great. I love the guts of this, because it's showing you that, this is a very lived-in universe that now is spanning multiple decades within the construct of the MCU. They're only 7 years into their universe, but they've got the kind of chutzpah, for lack of a better term, to show these characters at different ages of their lives, and a continuity factor here, right? With Haley Atwell coming in as Peggy Carter. And certainly, she's one of these interesting characters that people love, but has always been on the periphery of things since Iron Man. Yet whenever she shows up, people are always excited to see her. So it's a very interesting, and still enduring still today, Steve, with her role in What If, voicing over Captain Britain and Captain whatever she's calling herself in What If. And then the rumors about her possibly having a live action part to play in Secret Wars. So this is a character that people love from the first Captain America.
I think she is one of the most unmarred characters in the MCU. Like they're just, I think she's universally, we just really like Peggy Carter. Maybe I'll just speak for myself. I just really like Peggy Carter and love her every time she pops up.
I agree 100%.
Tell me that isn't what I think it is.
That depends if you think it's a poor attempt to replicate my work. Even for this group, that takes nerve.
And there is Mitchell Carson, one of our baddies, who's played by Martin Donovan.
You were instructed to go to Russia. May I remind you, Dr. Pym, that you're a soldier?
I'm a scientist.
Then act like one.
Yeah, Martin Donovan, a great actor. Again, another fantastic character actor from Reseda, California. He first made his bones working with Hal Hartley, the great Hal Hartley, in many films like Trust and Surviving Desire, Simple Man, Amateur, The Book of Life, and then collaborator and worked on Christopher Nolan's Insomnia. So he's a guy you've seen in a million things like Weeds and Tenet and what have you. So just a really good actor. Yeah, and he always plays a good villain. He always plays a good villain. So immediately making him like the antagonist to Hank Pym, I think is such a smart move casting-wise for the MCU in this movie.
Well, and they have to do so little heavy lifting to pull that off, because he just gives one sort of look and we already don't like the guy.
The Pym particle is the most revolutionary science ever developed. Help us put it to good use.
That you turn me into your errand boy, and now you try to steal my research?
If only you'd protected Janet with such ferocity, Dr. Pym.
And Howard gives a look, and there's a huge reaction, and Hank hauls off and punches him in the nose.
Easy, Hank.
And Hank is trying to resign because he doesn't want the Pym particle, which is one of the most important scientific advances in the MCU, to fall into the wrong hands.
As long as I am alive, nobody will ever get that formula.
And he exits.
You shouldn't let him leave the building.
You've already lied to him. Now you want to go to war with him.
Yes. Our scientists haven't come close to replicating his work.
You just kicked your ass full size. You really want to find out what it's like when you can't see him coming?
And this is how you do it. The camera then pushes in on Mitchell Carson, and that push in tells us that he is the bad guy and he is going to work to make Hank Pym an antagonist.
Yeah.
I love this music choice. The song that comes up is Bronbon by Camilo Aziquita, and it is just an entirely different feel for a Marvel movie.
love it. You know, it's got that, of course, it's got that Latino energy to it. And so I loved this as an opening song because you're like, wait, we just saw a bunch of white people and this is going to star a white person. Where are we getting this from? And of course, this is going to lead us to Michael Peña's character, who is quietly one of a lot of people's favorite characters in the MCU. And a lot of people feel like this was that he was sorely missed in Quantumania. One of the reasons that film didn't turn out as well as they wanted.
Oh my God. If they had brought him to the quantum realm.
Oh my God. Can you imagine? Oh, it would have been so funny.
It would be, I mean, that movie is so, obviously we're not going to go into detail, but
right.
It's not that, to me, it's not that it's bad. It's just that it's not good. You know, like, it's just like, there's a bunch of things happening and it's fine, you know, but if you would add Michael Peña, it's an entirely different movie.
Right. And crazily, a lot of people who we're about to talk about in this movie end up in that movie, and it's a bit of a law of diminishing returns. Yeah,
totally. And we cut to Scott Lang, Paul Rudd, looking a bit scruffy in prison guard. He is stealing himself for something, then nods, then gets punched right in the face. What I like about this setup is we go, oh, I get it. Scott has to defend himself in prison and he has to face the big tough guy. I've been in prison movies before. I understand what this is. And he attacks this guy, gets tossed. And then he kind of goes, well, what if I come to the left side? And he fools him, distracts him, and then the big right cross to the face. No reaction whatsoever. And we're going, oh no, Scott's just going to get his ass kicked. And Peachy goes,
I miss you, Scott.
I miss you too, Peachy.
And everybody hugs. John, what do you think of this introduction to Scott Lang?
I don't know that it necessarily holds up 10 years later, but for the time that it came out, I think this was a fun introduction to Scott Lang, an unusual introduction to Scott Lang. And so for me, it still works, but I don't know if it necessarily holds up as funnily as it did back then, considering some of the conversations and the things we've had about this idea of how to introduce certain characters and what scenarios you use them to. Because what is the situation here? He's a cat burglar, right? So what is the level of prison he'd actually be in? I don't think he'd be in one of these kind of hardcore prisons. He'd probably be more in a white collar prison, but depending on the situation. So, but yeah, it's fine. It reminds me a lot of Face Off, a little bit of the Face Off action.
Face Off, a movie, in my opinion, we're not doing on the Cine-Files.
No, I don't think so either. But there is apparently another version coming, or a sequel coming, that's been rumored to be worked on for quite some time. So we'll see how that plays.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's my feeling. The very first Marvel movie we ever did, unsurprisingly, was a long time ago when we did Iron Man. And my comment and feeling about Iron Man has always been that Iron Man, if you just look at it as a film, is a B to B plus film with a plus charismatic performance from Robert Downey Jr. That's my opinion about that movie. Sure. I think the more you think about the movie, there's a lot of holes and things that don't quite work or make sense. But Robert Downey Jr. is amazing. I think what's happening in this scene is kind of similar. Yeah. I don't think that Paul Rudd is quite at the Robert Downey Jr. level of massive amounts of charisma, but he is so unbelievably likable. Yeah. And that's what happens in the scene was I go like, oh, the guy who I thought was going to fight in the classic prison, I have to take out the biggest guy in the room, is actually so charming that everyone really likes each other and all the criminals are friends and happy, and isn't that nice? And I agree with you. I don't think it quite works. Yeah. And the more thought about it, it's like, what the hell is going on? You just, the day you leave prison, you have to get punched by the biggest guy? Like what? This doesn't, it makes no sense whatsoever. But Paul Rudd is charming.
Yes, of course, as he always is. Yeah.
Yeah. And now we see him walking, escorted by guards out of the entrance or exit of San Quentin. And there, as we mentioned before, is Michael Peña. Here was their idea for this scene initially, which is Michael Peña would be waiting, and instead of holding a giant boombox over his head, he would be holding his iPhone over his head and playing Peter Gabriel's "In Your Eyes" as Scott Lang comes out of San Quentin.
Well, judging from my laughter, I kind of like that idea. I think that would have been very funny to see, personally.
They actually shot it, and frankly, the rights to the song were just too damn expensive, and so they couldn't do it.
Makes sense.
But it's a really funny idea.
Hey, what's up with your eye?
Oh, what do you think? Peachy, it's a going away present.
Oh, yeah, I still got my scar from a year ago.
Because, of course, Luis had to do the same thing, so now we know that he's been in prison too.
Yeah.
And then we cut to them driving on an absolutely beautiful mountain road, which is on what's so funny is I know exactly where this is because this is where I grew up. I grew up, I drive by San Quentin all the time when I'm going up to my mom's house. And this road is nowhere near San Quentin. It's the most inconvenient thing. They had to drive. I don't know if they went up through Fairfax to get over to the coast and come around Mount Tam to come, but it's very inconvenient what they're doing. And this is one of those funny things of like, when you know, like if you're a computer program and you watch someone coding, you're like, that's not coding. If you're a hunter and you watch someone hunter, you're like, no hunter would ever do that. If you live in a certain area and you watch a movie shot there, you're like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Why are they on that road? But it is beautiful.
It is beautiful, yeah.
One other thing about this drive is sometimes when you're shooting a car scene, frequently is you're in a camera car, which means that the car is really on a trailer. Being hauled by another vehicle. And so the person who's pretending to drive is not really driving. But sometimes you actually have them driving and you just have a cameraman sitting in the car. And in this case, that's what they did. And they're driving on this windy road along the coast with the director in the back of the van directing. And apparently, Michael Peña, scary driver.
Oh, really?
Wow. Yeah, they were a bit nervous driving along this road while he was acting.
Well, I'm not surprised. Some of us, we got a little lead foot. Some of us. I'm just going to put that on the table.
Are you making racial generalizations around the
about my people?
Of
yes, absolutely.
Right.
I can bring Lilly in here. She'll tell you.
I have no comments to bring to bear on this. I'm only reporting what I heard in the commentary track.
Hey, how's your girl, man?
She left me.
Oh.
Yeah, my mom died too. And my dad got deported. But I got the van.
It's nice.
Yeah, right?
You just love Michael Peña from the beginning.
Yes.
Luis is a fantastic character.
This is an interesting characterization. And I bring this up as a Latino who some of you know, I am very sensitive at times about how Latino and Hispanic characters are portrayed in films, especially in big franchise films. And I can see how some people might see this as a little bit of a stereotype because right off the bat, A, he's a former prisoner. So he's ex-con. B, he's got the accent. C, his girl left him is not that, but like his dad was deported. So you've got some stereotypes working, but what Michael Peña does with the characterization kind of blows that all away and moves that all away because it's such an interesting character. It's not the standard approach in terms of how he's playing him. So it endears you to him. So I have to give credit to Michael Peña for walking a tightrope with this interpretation of this character. And I think it's one of the reasons why people love him so much in the Ant-Man universe, because he seems like just a very nice, open guy, even though he's been a former prisoner and he's involved with getting Scott back into the life of burglary. He just seems like a really nice guy. And so there's that element to it. And I think that's a difficult thing to portray when you're portraying a character like this. And Peña kills it,
I think you make a great point, and I think it's like a good clue on how to fight against the cliche. Because as you say, former criminal, doesn't have his dad just got deported. He drives the van that plays La Cucaracha. Exactly. There's a lot of stuff that is, but then there's a whole bunch of stuff that isn't cliche. Yeah. First of all, just his rhythm and his personality and his incredible sweetness doesn't fit that cliche. But also, he loves fine wine. He loves Rothkos, which he prefers to other impressionists. Like there's all sorts of things about him that are totally Luis and nobody else.
100%. Yep. Yeah. That's a great point, Steve. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I got to introduce you to some people, some really skilled people.
Not interested.
Yeah, right.
No, I'm serious, man. I'm not going back. I got a daughter to take care of.
And this is the central plot of the movie right here. Yep. This is the character thing. I don't want to be a criminal again. I have a daughter to take care of.
You know that jobs don't come easy for ex-cons, right?
Look, man, I got a master's in electrical engineering, all right? I'm going to be fine.
Anytime anyone says, I'm going to be fine at the beginning of a movie, they are not going to be fine. That's not how movies work.
I can't wait to get out of here and go to Coney Island and take Sheila on the rides. Dead.
Yeah. It's 3 days before I retire. Everything's going to be great after that.
So true.
And of course, what we have is, as we talked about many times, the joke is completed in a cut because we cut to him in the Baskin-Robbins uniform. This was added, by the way, as we mentioned, Adam McKay and Paul Rudd took over the script. This is all Adam McKay and Paul Rudd stuff.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
At Baskin-Robbins.
That makes sense. Yeah.
We have a ridiculous thing with a dude trying to buy a hamburger or something fresh or a pretzel. Now, I know this is a dumb question. Is this an idiot or is he messing with Scott? That's what I can't tell.
No, I think this guy is legitimately dumb. And, I think probably people who worked in Baskin-Robbins will tell you that occasionally you get dumb people who walk in there and who don't know, what you serve or what you don't serve and don't bother to look at the menu or pay attention to it. I think anybody who's worked in any kind of, how can I say this correctly? Any kind of low-income food place, you're going to run into people who aren't maybe all on top of things and will make these kinds of comments. But again, as much of a stereotype as we talk about with Luis, this is a white dude who's acting really stupid here in Baskin-Robbins about what's hot or what isn't hot or what they serve or don't serve. But I think it's also a bit of a commentary that they're making these little shots at Marvel fans. Like, hey, can you give me this? We don't have that. Okay, I want this though, but we don't have that. We don't serve that. So I think there's a little bit of like slight commentary against Marvel fans because there was a little bit of backlash that was starting to build now 7 years into the universe against the movie, against some of these movies and against some of the approach that Marvel was taking. I could be reading a bit too deep into it, but I just feel like maybe there was something here.
Well, John, I've never known you to read too deep into anything in the past, so I think this is 100% accurate. I will also say that being that my first job was scooping ice cream at Bud's Ice Cream in Tiburon at the Cove Shopping Center.
Yeah.
People do order weird stuff.
Yes, and don't pay attention to what's on the menu. Yes.
Yeah. But then he gets called, as he's dealing with this guy, he gets called into the back by Dale, who's played by Greg Turkington, who I think is a great character actor here.
Yeah. He's known for his performance as Neil Hamburger, a stand-up comedian persona he developed in the 1990s. But he started as a fictionalized version of himself in a comedic web series called On Cinema. And he formed one half of the band The Zip Code Rapists and has collaborated on numerous projects with musicians. But he ran an independent record label as well called Amarillo Records, which distributed his original albums and albums of other artists from the San Francisco punk scene, Steve. So he did all of this stuff here throughout. And he's also been seen in Gravity Falls and on Disney XD. And of course, he was in the sequel to this in Quantum, or the third film in the Ant-Man series in Quantumania, made a comeback with that as well. But he does a really good job in just such a limited amount of time. Great timing with this guy.
3 years at San Quentin, huh?
You found out.
Baskin-Robbins always finds out.
That's a great joke.
It is a great joke. It is no business working, yet it totally does.
And the other great thing about this scene is that Scott is upset and frustrated, of course, because he hid the fact that he was an ex-con and hoping to get this job, and now he's worried he's going to lose this job, which he really needs. But Dale is thrilled that Scott is a criminal.
I couldn't be happier about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
You really stuck it to those billionaire SOBs. And the more I read about what you did and stuff, I'm like, wow, I know this guy. I'm in charge of this guy.
The I'm in charge of this guy is great because it puts it in this really, it's not creepy, but it's weirdly awkward and bizarre that Dale is getting off of having a famous criminal working under him.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very happy in this job, and I really just appreciate the opportunity to help
you're
support
fired, of course. I mean, can't really keep you on.
Wait, what?
He walked him right into it. It's a great walking you right into it, isn't it? Oh, so
yeah. And Scott's trying to talk his way out of it, and Dale comes up with a great offer.
I'll tell you what, though, this will be totally off the books, off the records. But if you want to grab one of those mango fruit blasts on your way out the door, I'll just pretend I didn't see it.
I've so had bosses like this who think the little tiny perk of your job is like a fucking gift that you should be super grateful for.
I'm so glad I don't work retail anymore, or any version of retail anymore.
we're in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco, and we hear loud music playing, and he heads into this, older building where apparently there's a lot of stuff that goes on in this building. People are partying, all sorts of things we're going to see a little later.
Yeah.
And he enters the apartment in Luis, and so the exterior of the building, the stairway, the hallway, that was all shoot on location in San Francisco. Once we move into the interior of the apartment, it's all shot at, which I didn't realize, that Pinewood, the famous Pinewood Studios in London, opened up Pinewood Studios in Atlanta.
Oh, wow.
And this is the very first film ever to shoot at Pinewood Studios in Atlanta.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, let me ask you this, Steve. What do you think right off the bat in the first few minutes of this film? And, you're from this area, around this area. So do you think they're doing a really good job of kind of low-key establishing this area and the energy and the vibe of this area with the way they introduce San Francisco and that San Francisco area here in the opening?
I said this recently. We did a short on Sinners, and I mentioned watching Fruitvale Station, which I'd never seen, and that's the best version of Oakland, just across the bay from San Francisco, that I've ever seen photographed on film, where they really understood the essence of that city and the essence of Bay Area life. And this movie is not that. It's fine. Do they capture some of the beauty of San Francisco? Do they have the Victorian building? Do we have shots of the bay? Yes, we have all of those things. Does it feel like San Francisco? Honestly, Luis and his friends feel the most San Francisco-ish to me on some level, even though they're a bunch of criminals. But no, I don't get a huge. They really understand, that this is made by people who actually lived in the Bay Area. I don't feel that way at all.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
That's my feeling.
Oh, you're supposed to be at work.
I was. I got fired.
Damn, they find out who you are?
Yeah.
Baskin-Robbins always finds out, bro.
Baskin-Robbins don't play.
You got it. It's dangerous, right? Because it can become super cheesy, but you're doing just enough. They're doing just enough to hammer the point home, and then they're going to let it go for the movie, right? Which I think is genius.
And then again, to the point about Luis not being a cliched character, what does he say?
You want some waffles?
Yeah, I'll take a waffle.
Dude, you go to a dude's house and he offers you waffles.
And also ask yourself this: what ranking does Luis have in this crew? Because it doesn't seem like he does much except find the jobs, feed the guys, bring them together, and then make sure everybody's okay. So, it's an interesting position he has. He doesn't really participate, it seems like, in the robberies or whatever. It seems like it's more the two other guys that we're about to meet here and Scott. So I don't know how much he himself is a part of these robberies, which is interesting.
What's interesting to me is what you just described. He finds the jobs. He brings everybody in. He makes sure everyone's okay. He's the leader.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
That's what he does. These guys we're going to meet, which is Kurt, which is David Dastmalchian, and T.I. Harris, who plays Dave. Yeah. They're not going to find a job. They're not going to organize anything. And I also think that Luis, I'm glad you said this, because I think this brings up such a great point, which is, what kind of a leader is he? He is the mother hen kind of leader. Right. He is the compassionate, loving, kind, gentle, I'm going to make you waffles when you come to the house kind of leader.
Right.
That's this doesn't exist without him.
Yeah. Good point. That's why I asked. Yeah.
That's Kurt. He was Folsom for 5 years. He's a wizard on that laptop.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Who are you?
Dave.
It's an unusual collection of actors in there, right? As you mentioned, David Dastmalchian, he has been in a number of superhero films already. He was the Polka Dot Man in Suicide Squad, the most recent version.
Oh.
Yeah, with James Gunn, and he was in The Dark Knight as one of the, I think, the police officer that the Joker imitates or something like that. He's the one that goes crazy. He's also been in, he's also been in Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners, Blade Runner 2049. Remember, he's the guy that gets killed by the female replicant early on in the film. Dune. He's been in Dune. He was one of the one of the bad guys rather in Dune here. So, and he's a character actor, and he's recently seen Late Night with the Devil, which was a kind of quietly well enjoyed horror film. So Dastmalchian is a massive nerd. We had him at Collider a couple times for Collider Heroes, and he's knows his comic book stuff really, really well. So he's a great choice to throw in here, and he's putting on that accent. And then T.I. was the big surprise to me because I knew T.I. as a rapper. He'd done a lot of, he's very successful as a rapper and doing some R&B stuff, working with Justin Timberlake and other people. So when he veered into acting, I wasn't sure it was going to work because T.I. is very much like a different kind of energy, kind of like Common. I wasn't sure these guys were necessarily going to be dynamic on screen. And in this situation, he really is. I mean, at times, he's kind of see-through as an actor. You can see that he's kind of just saying the lines. But the energy of these four guys, when you include Paul Rudd and Michael Peña, it's a good energy. There's a good kind of camaraderie between the four slowly building from this scene onward.
Well, when you're putting a band together and you need someone to play an instrument, you don't need them to be able to play all the instruments. Right. You only need them to play the notes that are necessary to make that ensemble work together. And I think that's what this particular group of people works really, really well together,
Good point. Yep.
And they've heard, again, of Scott Lang's famous robbery. Yeah. And what we hear about this robbery, and if you look at the deleted scenes, there was much more stuff to explain what this was. But basically, he was working for a company that was ripping people off, and so he ripped off the evil company to give the money back to. So he pulled a Robin Hood crime and got caught.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's a good way, like right off the bat, you're like, okay, he's a criminal, he's in prison, this is not the usual entrance we find to a superhero. But then we hear about how he did it. And of course, listen, if you want to be by the book, you're probably not thinking this guy is a good guy for what he did. But most people are like, yeah, if this company was robbing people from their money and he stole the money back and gave it back to the people who lost that money, not a lot of people are going to think this guy is necessarily a bad guy or a criminal, right? I mean, they're going to sympathize with him much more. So it was smart and confident by the filmmakers by Peyton Reed and the screenwriters to be like, let's establish this and then let's give a little more depth to the guy because Paul is a naturally likable guy. So the audience is going to have patience for us to reveal if there's good things about this guy or not. So it's really smart the way they laid that out, film construction wise,
Well, this is classic save the cat. Save the cat being a term that we've used many times on the show, which is that I need to inform the audience that this is a good person so that we can like him. Now, I've expressed my issues with Save the Cat and why I don't always think it's necessary at other times on the show. But this is a really good example because we have a guy who is a criminal who is getting out of jail. And so we are concerned. We have to make sure the audience likes this guy. So scene one that we see him in the classic fight in prison. And then it realizes that he likes everybody and everybody likes him and they have big hugs. Oh, and I like this guy a little more. Yeah. Next moment he says, I got to take care of my daughter. That's the next Save the Cat thing.
Good point.
Then we see him in Baskin.
I'm not going to be a criminal again. I got to take care of my daughter. That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. Next, we see him in the scene in Baskin-Robbins where we see he just wants to work at the ice cream store and he gets fired. And we're like, oh, now we're feeling about him more. And now we hear that the big crime that he committed was actually a good guy crime. So we are layering Save the Cat after Save the Cat after Save the Cat to really say, no, audience, it's okay to like this guy, despite the fact I can't help liking him because Paul Rudd is just dreamy,
Fair point.
But Scott Lang at this moment is getting concerned because he's like, why are you telling my life story here?
Okay, my cousin talked to this guy 2 weeks ago about this little perfect job.
No way.
No, wait. This guy fits your MO.
No, I'm finished, man. I'm not going back to jail.
We cut to the Pym building, which was actually the Hall of Records in Atlanta, Georgia. Interestingly enough, the Hall of Records in Atlanta, Georgia is also the news station in Anchorman 2. So this is the second time that Paul Rudd shot there. And we see Hank Pym pulling up in his beautiful convertible and the parking lot guy there recognizes him and he says,
Dr. Pym?
Yes, I'm still alive.
And then we go inside and he's going through security. And I like the security guard goes,
ID?
Perhaps that will suffice.
And points to the giant painting of him on the wall.
So, Steve, we've both been comic book readers.
Yes.
We know Hank Pym can be quite an asshole in the comics.
Yes.
So did you like that Marvel didn't shy away from having Michael Douglas be a bit of a crotchety old fart? Like, did you like that he has prickly guy, very much, how can I say this? Very much in love with his intelligence and his knowledge, and not necessarily a guy who caters to anybody around him and is very focused on what he needs. From the opening introduction of him with everyone else back in 1989 to here, where he's sarcastic to the parking lot guy, he's sarcastic to the guy who is checking him in, the security guard. So he's got that kind of arrogance to him. Did you like that as an intro for Hank Pym as we know him from the comics?
Not only do I like it, I think they could have gone farther with the crotchetiness.
Oh, interesting.
I actually think, well, because I think Michael Douglas is so great at it.
Right.
He's,
totally.
like you don't cast Michael Douglas, but just as we said, like, Paul Rudd's like a warm hug everywhere he goes. And so is Michael Peña.
Right.
That's not what you cast Michael Douglas for,
That's a good point. It's a good point.
And so, I totally like it. What do you think?
Yeah. I think it's a really smart introduction to him because like you said, for those of us who grew up with Michael Douglas, we know that ever since from like the 70s, Streets of San Francisco on, he's always had this kind of swagger to him. And he's one of those people that came from someone really famous in Kirk Douglas who really forged his own path and in a completely different way. So the fact that he's showing up here, and it might be a bit of a meta thing because I wasn't sure how much Michael Douglas was working this time for him to say, yes, I'm still alive, kind of saying like as an older actor, I'm still here. So I love this as an introduction. And, people forget this man used to be a box office draw, worldwide box office draw. So to have him come in to help another guy be the lead of the movie, it's great that he accepted doing the role,
So, and then we meet Darren Cross, played by Corey Stoll. Now, this was originally going to be Patrick Wilson was going to play this part.
Ooh, interesting.
And because of the changes in schedule, it ended up that he was on another shoot and he couldn't do it. And that's how we get Corey Stoll to come in. Yeah,
and Corey Stoll, I think a lot of he is best known for his role on House of Cards. And if you guys haven't watched House of Cards, I know Spacey and all that. It's still an excellent, excellent show. But he was also a series regular on The Strain. FX's The Strain. And he portrayed Michael Prince in Billions for about 3 years. A lot of people like that show. I think I first got to know him as a series regular on Law and Order LA with him and Skeet Ulrich and Alfred Molina, which I wish that show had gotten more seasons because I liked that show. It had to find its footing. But he also played Ernest Hemingway in Woody Allen's Midnight in Paris. He was in Black Mass, First Man, The Seagull, Many Saints of Newark, West Side Story. And he's done a lot of work on Broadway as well. So this is a very, very well-seasoned actor who's been successful in multiple mediums.
And we also meet Hope Van Dyne, played by Evangeline Lilly. Here are some of the other people that were considered. And I think they made the right choice. I really like Evangeline Lilly in it. And what's interesting is that if you picture each of these three people, you can see how the movie shifts in my mind to their characters. So these are the other three people. Bryce Dallas Howard. Rashida Jones. And Jessica Chastain. And each one of these is different and would take the movie in a different direction. And I think Evangeline Lilly is kind of in the middle of all of them, is how I would feel about it.
And also, all of them can pull off the bangs look that Evangeline Lilly is wearing. But I would argue all three of them may be pulling off the bangs look a little better than Evangeline Lilly does in the movie. But yeah, you could see it. You're right. All three of them have very strong energies. I mean, Rashida probably would be more a little bit of the comedic side of things. And what I like about Evangeline's performance is it's a much more colder performance until it has to go soft, which is, of course, later in the car when she realizes that he has a daughter and that she had turned him in and for her own selfish desires to wear the costume. And she wasn't wrong, by the way. I want to make that clear. But Chastain, I think, would have been a bit more of an abrasive choice. Bryce Dallas Howard and Evangeline Lilly, I think you're right. Like, she falls right in the middle, Evangeline does, of all of these actresses, and portrays the steeliness and the vulnerability really well, and carries over in the next two films as well.
Well, this is what when you're casting, you're going like, okay, I need to get all of these things. And so it's like, you need someone that can be tough. And like you go like, well, Jessica Chastain can certainly pull off the toughness.
Yeah.
I need someone who can be funny and play off the comedy. Well, Rashida Jones, obviously we've seen her do that. I need someone that has some emotion and some sensitivity. It's like, well, I can totally see Bryce Dallas Howard doing that. And it's like, how much of each of these things do I want? And Evangeline Lilly delivers them to me in the right combo, in the right proportions.
Yeah, I would agree with you, brother. 100%.
Good morning, Hank.
Hope. Would it kill you to call me Dad?
This is as brief, like that is efficient screenwriting right there. Like I got it. You know?
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Cross will be so pleased that you could find the time to join us today.
More like thrilled.
I was surprised to receive any kind of invitation from you, Darren.
So already we've got, would it kill you to call me dad?
Yeah.
And I'm surprised to receive any invitation from you, Darren. And yes, I'm still alive. There's a lot of stuff that we've established just with those kind of what seem like sort of throwaway lines.
That's a great point. We kind of have a niggling thought at the back of our minds of, has he not been around, or have they iced him out? What's going on here? Yeah, great point.
What's the occasion?
Oh, you'll see. Only hope.
There's a long pause, and Hope just says,
We're ready for you inside.
Ouch. I guess some old wounds never heal, huh?
I'm just gonna say this right at the beginning. The only thing I genuinely don't really like in this movie is Corey Stoll's performance as Darren Cross.
Wow.
I just don't like. I think, and I'm not. He's a really good actor.
He is.
And I've said this many times. My tendency is to blame script and to blame directors before I blame actors. But he's just so obviously the bad guy from the beginning, and his motivation is like, I'm the bad guy. That's how it feels throughout this whole movie to me.
It's a great point. What's the term you use all the time? And of course, it's a film term, but hanging a lantern on, like they really hang a lantern on how much of a bad guy he is right off the bat, right?
Yeah.
With Martin Donovan, because Martin has played bad guys his whole life. Martin can play it a little more subtly, right? Even when he's being obvious. Well, if you had taken care of Janet, I wish there's a little subtlety to it that leads you towards the evil place with him, but it's interesting, right? But with Corey, you're right. I mean, as I just said, regaling everybody with his resume, he's a very well-established and experienced actor. But I agree with you. In this situation, it may just be that Corey wasn't challenged by any of the material because he's so damn good. He's like, you know what? I'm just gonna, do my thing and represent what I need to represent here in the role and play it. And so that's what you get, which, later on becomes MODOK in Quantumania. But
yeah,
I know people hate that. I liked him in that role for as little time as we got with him in the movie. I thought he was more alive in that role than he is in this role. So I agree with you.
I agree, actually.
Right? There's more to play for him playing the MODOK character as opposed to this, which is so one-dimensional and I'm angry and I'm going to get my revenge, or people are going to respect me, but there needed to be more here. And I wonder if maybe he wasn't the right rhythm for what they wanted to go for. And in the end, they had to go with him. I could see Patrick Wilson doing this role better, for sure. Even though I think Patrick sometimes can phone it in, I do think he'd probably deliver a better performance here. Yeah.
There's a thing, and I'm sure you had this teacher tell you this in acting class at some point, or maybe told other actors this as you were working on it, which is don't play the end of the scene.
Yes, 100%.
So frequently what will happen with young actors, beginning actors, is they'll go like, okay, this is the scene where I have the big fight with my girlfriend.
Right.
And so they come into the scene at 88% of the fight.
Yeah, they're already there.
And it's like, no, the fight has to emerge in the scene. You have to come in somewhere else, and then you can get there. If you start there, you have nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
He starts this movie as the bad guy.
And that's the thing. And Steve is 100% right. And that's the thing that you discover because like Steve said, with young actors, you want to and you have this yourself, Steve, when you deal with directors, like they want to jump ahead. And the thing is, no, you've got to build to your big climax as a director, the same thing as an actor. You've got to build to these moments. If you're already this from the beginning, the audience has nowhere else to go with you. So it's not as interesting of a performance. And you're undercutting yourself. Now, look, I am no one to judge or guide or critique Corey Stoll as an actor. But Steve is right. If you played the end of the scene already, which is where you're supposed to end up, you're depriving the audience of all the juiciness and interesting conflict that can happen leading up to that moment. So if any of you are listening who are young actors, the goal is not to hit that moment as believably as possible. The goal is to hit every moment leading up to that moment believably as possible and then hit that big moment. And so it's important to play it as a build rather than a consistent through line, almost like, and I would make this connection because that's what it feels like when you're watching a performance like this, like when the heartbeat goes out and it's just a deet, that's what your performance is. It's kind of DOA, dead on arrival, if you don't give it more life and more and have the audience be a little bit more engaged in whether you're going to go one way or another. And with Corey, you never doubt that through the whole movie, you know?
Well, in my gut, and I have no evidence for this whatsoever, but my gut is this is the director. My gut is that they said, because the thing is like, if you think of just the character arc as one would describe it, like if I was pitching this to you as an actor, I would say, okay, there's this guy, young, brilliant scientist, becomes the mentee of one of the greatest scientists of all time, admires him totally, and that scientist ices him out and doesn't let him in on his important research, and he is desperate to please him. And that desperation to please him leads him to make evil decisions, right? That's sort of the breakdown. But if you wanted to do that, then you should play this opening scene that he still wants Hank's approval, that he still is desperately trying to be respected by him, but he's already turned the corner to, I want to destroy Hank and I'm evil. Like he's already there, you know? And it's like, if we had, and throughout the whole movie, he's already just a horrible fucking person. He's never put in the position. It's never like, I have made a deal with Hydra to sell them this thing and it's not working. And now I'm desperate and I'm cutting corners so that I'm going to put proto matter into the matrix of the Genesis project. And that is a shortcut that leads to bad things. Those people who don't get that reference, they can look it up. But we never see that. He's already evil. He's already doing terrible things from the beginning. And so he doesn't have any journey to go on as a character at all.
Well, and that was one of the big problems with the first 2-3 phases of Marvel, right? Were the complaints about villains, and that the villains were essentially just the reverse of the heroes. And there wasn't much depth to them outside of Loki. And it really isn't until Black Panther that people start turning the corner on Marvel villains. But this is another kind of example. And again, this is not an indictment on Corey Stoll, but it is how he's been directed to be in this movie. And so you can't help but point it out as we're talking about it. And it did lead to bigger conversations about the issue with Marvel villains. You know?
Well, and this is an editing thing too, because it's very possible that they're 4 takes.
Yes.
And they have from totally subtle and soft to full villain evil. And you have 4 takes on 50 shots with him. And if they always choose the evil one, well, then the editor has dictated what kind of performance you get.
Yeah,
you know?
100%. Great point. Yep.
The other person that showed up, of course, is Martin Donovan, Mitchell Carson.
Long time no see, Dr. Pym. How's retirement?
How's your face?
You're right. He's a dick. I mean, like
but it's an interesting dick. And there's
an interesting dick.
When I took over this company for Dr. Pym, I immediately started researching a particle that could change the distance between atoms while increasing density and strength.
So here's this basic idea, which is that there is a rumor, never confirmed, that Hank created this technology and he hid it and hasn't told anyone about it, including Darren Cross, who has been looking for it forever.
Why this revolutionary idea remained buried beneath the dust and cobwebs of Hank's research, I couldn't tell you. But just imagine a soldier the size of an insect.
And he turns on monitors, and now we get this old video footage where just barely you have evidence of this tiny figure who's thrown off a tank and fighting people and taking out guys. Their inspiration for how they filmed this, they wanted it to look like, the old Bigfoot footage? Like the blurry from a distance. Is that real? Is it not? That's what they wanted this to look like.
It's a good idea. It works.
The ultimate secret weapon. An Ant-Man. That's what they called you. Right, Hank?
But this is what inspired Cross to figure out how to do this.
Distinguished guests, I am proud to present the end of warfare as we know it. The Yellow Jacket.
And we bring down the tiny little yellow figure in this glass box. Then they give the pitch on this thing, which is really, really scary.
We live in an era in which the weapons we use to protect ourselves are undermined by constant surveillance. It's time to return to a simpler age, one where the powers of freedom can once again operate openly to protect their interests.
I'm always thrilled when I hear about the powers of freedom operating openly. This sounds great. And what we see is so messed up because the Yellow Jacket, we watched this video of it taking out a limo, assassinating a guy at a computer. It seems really, really scary.
But clearly this is... this is a theme that runs through a lot of this second phase of the MCU. Who should really be taking care of the Earth, right? Who should be in charge of security of the planet? And we'll see that with with Tony Stark, with Ultron, and then we'll see it with Winter Soldier, right? Who should be in charge? Who's really in charge? And how far are they willing to go in order to have the security that a lot of people crave? How much freedoms are they willing to sacrifice? And will this be okay to create, in essence, yet again, another super soldier who will, in essence, protect, a bunch of them will protect the world and our interests, But of course, he's selling it to the highest bidder, which makes it all the more creepier.
Right. And that's why we know it's the people of freedom, because the people who are the highest bidders are always the one who care about freedom.
Yeah, of course they do. Yeah.
Well, and the interesting thing too in our world today is that it's everything that you say, and it's also about technology and who gets to control the technology. And in a world today where, we have superpowers battling over who will control AI.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the world we're in.
That's true. That's true.
And one of the guys there, whose name I think is Frank, goes,
"So it's a suit."
This does not make Cross happy.
Don't be crude, Frank. It's not a suit, it's a wessel.
And that's Joe Crest, who's playing Frank, and Joe Crest, of course, in Stranger Things, he's the dad of the two kids there, the Wheeler kids, in the show. So he's been on every season.
Cross puts his hand on his shoulder and goes,
"We should have a longer conversation about that, Frank. I really value your opinion."
And again, this is where it's all bad guy energy, is that if you had actually did it sincere, then we would have mystery, and we would be surprised by what happens in the next moment. But because he plays it so bad guy, it's all bad guy.
But also the direction here, Steve, in close-up, it's so obvious. If you had shot this a little further away so that it looks like he's like just putting his arm on his shoulder and trying to, calm him down, or trying to, assuage his fears, for lack of a better word, it would have played a little bit differently. But it's so obvious when he taps on there, and then you have Joe Crest look at his shoulder as if, like, that's so weird. They make it way too obvious.
Aaron, there's a reason that I buried these secrets.
So you finally admit it. We could have done this together, Hank, but you ruined that. That's why you're the past and I'm the future.
Don't do this.
It's all bad guy lines.
And it's all exposition. We don't see any of this, right? So they're just taking a shortcut a little bit by establishing all this.
Well, you know what? Here's how I would rewrite this. Is that because what Cross is doing right now is announcing, I'm ready to sell this thing, even though he's not.
Right.
And he is not trying to get Hank's help. And the thing that he really needs is the Pym particle, because he doesn't have it yet, because he hasn't figured it out, because we're going to kill a bunch of lambs later in this movie, right?
Yeah.
So he's not ready yet. If this scene was about, maybe I can finally convince him to give me the Pym particle, then the whole way the scene would play is different. Because he wouldn't, because what he's playing right now is being a dick to Hank and like being rude to Frank and being aggressive. But if he didn't give this sales pitch, but gave a different sales pitch about how he could save lives by curing cancer or something with the Pym particle, and go like, hey, I really want you on my side. And then he couldn't get Hank on his side, so he can't sell the thing. So he keeps selling killing lambs.
Yeah.
Then this all makes more sense.
Right.
But because he's already trying to sell the thing, but he doesn't have the thing, and he only brought Hank in to be a dick to him. There was no reason to bring Hank here. Anyway.
Yeah, great point.
And now Hope is alone with Hank.
You just give me the suit and let me finish this once and for all.
No.
I have Cross's complete trust.
It's too dangerous.
We don't have a choice.
Well, it's not entirely true. I think I found a guy.
Cut to a birthday party with Scott, who enters, and immediately his daughter Cassie, played by Abby Ryder Fortson, runs up to him and gives him a big hug.
She played Ella Novak in Transparent, Harper Weil in The Whispers. She was in Togetherness. And Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. She was in that recent film as well. So, and sadly, she was recast once they moved into Quantumania with Catherine Newton, and I would argue that it was a bad miscasting because the actresses who play her have such a nice energy in these two movies.
I'm so sorry I'm late. I didn't know what time your party started.
It was on the invitation.
He didn't get an invitation, but he came anyway.
And there is one of my favorite character actors, Bobby Cannavale, playing Jim Paxton.
Yeah, I mean, Bobby Cannavale, Third Watch, Will and Grace, Nurse Jackie, Boardwalk Empire, Vinyl, Mr. Robot, Blue Bloods, and of course, a bunch of films, but also Broadway stuff as well. You know, he earned a Tony nomination for Mauritius back in 2008. So a guy who, again, just like Corey Stoll, a guy with a lot of credits, a lot of experience playing all kinds of types of film, playing all kinds of types of characters in different genres of film and TV and on stage.
He's one of those guys that can do it all.
Yep,
you know,
100%.
You put him in a wacky sitcom, he's hilarious. You put him in a heavy, serious thing, he could do that. He could be scary. He can do it all. He's great.
Yeah, I loved him in Boardwalk Empire. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, so good. And you could feel immediately what's going on.
What are you doing here? I haven't paid a dime of child support. You know, right now, if I wanted to, I could arrest you.
As opposed to the stuff we were saying about Darren Cross, I think they walk this line really, really well.
I agree.
Which is totally understanding why the new cop fiance of his ex doesn't trust this guy.
Right.
Without making Jim a fully bad guy. He's not an asshole.
Right.
He actually cares about Cassie, cares about Maggie, and doesn't trust this criminal because he's a cop and the guy's not paying child support, you know.
He doesn't put his hands on him. He isn't abrasive to him. He's just very clear because he's being sensitive to Cassie, who still loves her father. So yeah, you're right. They walk that line really well with him. And Cannavale, as you said, can do everything. So he plays it note perfect.
I love Cassie comes back and goes, "Mommy's so happy you're here. She choked on her drink." And he gives her the gift. And she has to open it now. And she opens up the most disturbing and ugly stuffed animal possibly in the history of the world.
And that's Tom Kenny, who does the voice of the doll here. And of course, Tom Kenny from SpongeBob and other things. So, yeah.
You are my bestest friend.
What is that thing?
What's so great about this moment is that it's obviously the perfect gift.
He's so ugly. I love him. Can I go show my friends?
Yeah, of course, sweetheart. Go ahead.
So 2 things about this. One is that this is I think very key to establishing Scott's love for his daughter. Not only his love for his daughter, but his deep understanding. Nobody knows Cassie the way Scott does, because only Scott would give her this horrible, awful gift, knowing that she will love it.
Yeah, great point. Yes.
They also had huge arguments about this gift because
really,
Rudd didn't like that. Paul Rudd, in the script that he came up with, Adam McKay and Paul Rudd, they wanted to give her something really weird. And it was the director's idea to give her something really terrifying and ugly. And Paul's like, "No, that's wrong. No, he's not going to give her. That's going to scare her." And the director went, "Trust me." And when Paul saw the movie, he was like, the director was totally right. This was the right way to go.
I wonder why. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I wonder why is that a carryover, do you think, from Edgar Wright? Like, Edgar Wright had a approach to it that was much more, because he's, you know, obviously doing the Cornetto trilogy. There's a lot of kind of pseudo horror in the Cornetto trilogy and terrifying, ugly things in the Cornetto. So maybe he thought maybe this is something Peyton Reed carried over from the script and wanted to keep it this way. I wonder.
I don't know. My gut, and again, it's like, you know, you kind of piece things together from various sources of information. What I believe is that the crazy gift was not from Edgar Wright. It was from the Adam McKay, Paul Rudd script.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not sure. I actually don't know. But what I think is more, I mean, this is just what people don't understand about making movies. You spend a lot of time talking about, well, what does that prop look like? Would it be better like this? And particularly when you're making a joke prop like this, it's like you want it to be extreme, and they went extreme in this direction versus that direction.
Look, the child support is coming. All right, it's just hard finding a job when you have a record.
I'm sure you'll figure it out, but for now, I want you out of my house,
wait,
okay?
It's my daughter's birthday.
It's my house.
So what? It's my kid.
And then he sees Mom, Maggie, who's played by Judy Greer.
Really? Maggie? That guy? Come on, you can marry anyone you want. You have to get engaged to a cop?
At least he's not a crook.
It's hard. It's hard, you know?
Yeah.
And I really do think they set up this situation really, really well. He wants to be a father to the daughter, and what he did in the past and all of this stuff is preventing it.
I also think this is smart writing. Like I think we have a right to criticize where we think the writing's a little falls short or maybe too much of an exposition dump. We also take the moments to praise good writing, and I think the way they lay out this whole family and extended family characters works really well. As you mentioned, Bobby doesn't come in and is like abrasive and throws him against the wall or says, "Get the hell out of my house." It doesn't do anything like that. That's really mean, right? It's always in service to Cassie and checks in with her. When she says, "Can I show people?" Of course, honey, go show people. Go do this. He's very caring with her. So he is a person who has affection for Scott's daughter. But he's also clear with Scott, like, you haven't paid your, what are you doing here? Like, so you see that. And even when Scott tries to go at Cassie's mom, Maggie, you see that she's willing to hear him out, but she's also clear about the boundaries. And she isn't coming off as some shrill or nag or, which is an easy way they could have played this character and written this character. She wants him to be a part of her life, but he has to step up and show that he wants to be a part of her life. And I get it. You might be like, well, his crime was a crime from a good place. But when you're a mom, it's the concern of the child that matters the most. And you don't, no matter what he was put in prison for, you still have an ex-con for a dad. And so you want him to show efforts that he's going to be a better person. And then you're more than happy to let Cassie establish a relationship with him. So I like that they didn't default to play the stereotypes of these characters, and they're much more well-rounded than you might have seen in other scripts or other versions of this kind of story.
Two things about this. One is I think there's sort of a mismatch in the setup. I don't think it affects the movie negatively, but it doesn't bear scrutiny, which is that they talk about him as a cat burglar. And his buddies are Luis. I guess he just met Luis in prison. But there's more of an implication. The feeling is that he has committed more than one crime. But the way they establish thing is there's only this one big crime, which was taking from the rich and giving to the poor. And it doesn't quite match. It's fine. I don't think it's a problem, but it's like, if you think about it, it doesn't quite hold up.
It's a good point. It does seem like there's been multiple crimes on his ledger, but this is probably the first time he's been caught, maybe. I don't know.
But then if you go down that path, it's like, well, if he's committing multiple crimes, then he's really not a good guy.
Right.
Like that's where, but again, it doesn't bear a lot of scrutiny. The other thing I think is that what's great about Cannavale's character, and I think he plays it perfectly. And I'm friends with a cop, and it's like, when you're a cop, you see the way all the things go south. Your sample set of how you see the world includes way more shit than a normal people's sample set. And so he's looking at this guy and goes, look, I've known a lot of ex-cons. This doesn't go well. Most of the time they return to crime.
Yeah. Good point.
And she goes, but this moment, I think, with Maggie is really what sells what we've been setting up this whole time, which is Scott's motivation.
I want to provide. I had a lot of time to think about it, and I love her so much. I've missed so much time, and I want to be a part of her life. What do I do?
Get an apartment, get a job, pay child support. And then we will talk about visitation, I promise. You're her hero, Scott. Just be the person that she already thinks you are.
It's so great. She is not, again, she's someone who wants to make it happen. And I love the way Judy Greer delivers these lines. It's very real and believable. And you can tell that she just wants to make sure that Cassie is happy because that makes her happy. So, but he's got to step up. And we establish his struggle, right? Because this is what the whole film is going to be. Yeah, exactly.
This is the movie, yeah. Yep. And then he gets in the van, and they're watching him, and Cassie's watching him, and he winks, and then he hits that La Cucaracha horn. And I hadn't really thought about it. I should have thought about it before you brought it up. I mean, I thought about the horn, but it is really way far in the cliche. It shouldn't work. It's so far in that direction.
But that's why you cast someone like Michael Peña, because and that's why you write the character to have a little more nuance to him than you initially might expect, But also, it's not necessarily he's not going, "Hey man, what's going down, man?" Like there's he's got a little bit of an accent to him, of course, but it's not like Cheech and Chong over here. You know what I'm saying? I think that's really important. And and nothing about him radiates this kind of like low-level human being. He's, he's in a situation that he's in, but he's, and even though I like the horn as a funny little thing, you know why? Because I grew up in Southern Virginia where a bunch of these white hillbillies had fucking songs to their horns. So why wouldn't some Mexicans have songs to their horns? So, it is what it is.
So I know that your ancestry is Bolivian, not Mexican.
Yep.
But in my brain, the song La Cucaracha is a American cliche of what a Mexican might listen to. That is it is not like, it reminds me, the song that would always be played and is even part of like Kung Fu fighting, where it's anything Chinese and you'd hear that.
Oh, yes, right. That's terrible. Yes.
Yes, totally. And by the way, I found out that song is written by Jews. That's a Tin Pan Alley song from the early 20th century, which was the Tin Pan Alley version of what they thought Chinese music sounds like. So it isn't even from there, and it's like there's these certain like ethnic, it's like an ethnic ditty is what I guess I would call it, which is, and I could come up with ones for Italians. I could come up with ones for Germans, where it's like, here is the cliche that makes you think of this culture that probably isn't really from that culture.
Well, I mean, La Cucaracha is not a Mexican song. It's a Spanish song from Spain that was co-opted. It's a folk song. It's a popular folk song. But the origins are from Spanish, like all the way back in like the 1850s. They bring it all the way back to around that time to the the Hispano-Moroccan War from the 1859 to 1860. And it isn't until in the 1910s that it becomes popular during the Mexican Revolution. So they kind of co-opted La Cucaracha, and then Americans have kind of seen that song as a connective tissue to Mexico, but its origins are from Spain. So,
well, this is the kind of information that no other movie podcast in the world will give you.
I just want to make Steve makes these comments. I don't know. I have no way to verify this. I want to make
extensive research on the discussion of La Cucaracha in other film podcasts, and the Rewatchables has never mentioned it.
That's fair point. The Rewatchables, yeah. Or how did they make this movie? That other one. Yeah.
So cut back to Pym Industries. We're in the bathroom. This guy, Frank, who we met before, is Peen when Cross comes up.
Unfortunately, we can't just do whatever we want. Be nice, though, right? But there are laws.
What laws? Of man? The laws of nature transcend the laws of man. And I've transcended the laws of nature.
It's just terrible. I'd hate that. I mean, it's awful.
I know. I agree. The writing here is not for him is not that great. Even the scene makes no sense. You think Frank wouldn't know how terrifying this dude is, or how dangerous this dude is?
It makes why. So because then he starts to argue with him, and Cross shoots him, shrinks him into a little puddle of goo which by the way is strawberry jam, which he then wipes up and throws in the toilet. Why kill Frank? Like, what? I don't understand any point of this other than to say this guy's really bad.
Also, if you have security footage, Frank goes into the bathroom, then you go into the bathroom. Frank never comes out of the bathroom. What are we going to do? Like, what are we talking about here? It's such to kill him at your job. Like the logic of it just does not hold up. Yeah.
Well, and he checked in beyond that. He checked into the building and went security in the building and never left the building.
Right.
Like, and why kill him just because he said something critical at this, demonstration? Like, Frank wasn't a threat. Like, make him a threat if you want him to kill him.
He wasn't standing in the way of you selling this thing. Yeah, exactly.
No, or threatening to expose you or anything else. It's just crosses. He's a bad guy.
Yep.
We're having dinner at a restaurant with Hope. This was originally earlier in the film, and it was originally the introduction to Cross and Hope when they restructured a bunch of stuff. This scene sounds like it got rewritten over and over again. Like they're there was a pass from the Edgar Wright script. There was Adam McKay and Paul Rudd did a pass. They had other Marvel writers on the set rewriting this scene. They just really struggled with it.
I've been thinking a lot about gratitude lately. And today, during my morning meditation, an interesting thought occurred to me, and I think it might apply to you too.
Just in my morning meditation is just one of those examples. I'm trying to give this person a character, and it's just talking about their anger about Hank and why he's a terrible person, basically.
Yeah.
And then she gives the sort of toadying compliment that she needs to give to him.
You're a success, Darren. You deserve everything coming your way.
Which also has that little hint of menace in it. Scott is going over his finances, frustrated. We go back to the apartment where the guys are playing video games.
Tell me about that tip.
What?
I want to know about that tip.
Oh, baby, time!
Hot dog.
It's so on right now.
Calm down, all right? I just need to know where it came from. It's got to be airtight.
I think this is the most famous bit of filmmaking in this film, I think.
Yeah.
By the way, this was added when Peyton Reed, the director, came on. So this wasn't in the Edgar Wright script.
Oh.
It wasn't in the Adam McKay and Paul Rudd stuff, because the thing that Peyton Reed really wanted to emphasize that he didn't feel there was enough of was that this is a heist movie. And the heist movie has to have the good setup.
Yeah.
And so this was his idea. And I think this is just structurally so cool in terms of filmmaking. And the way they did this, because what's going to happen is we're going to fly through all these different locations, going back in time and back in time and back in time. And we're going to meet all these other characters and explain how this tip got to Luis and is going to Scott. But the only voice we're going to hear is Michael Peña's.
Right. Yeah.
Which I think is a fantastic choice. And the way they did this was first they shot what they called the radio cut, which is they shot Michael Peña delivering this whole story.
Right.
And then so you have to schedule it the right way. So you have to shoot all that first, so that then when you go on the set with the actors, they all are lip syncing to the audio from Michael Peña's initial performance.
Yeah.
I was at a wine tasting with my cousin Ernesto, which was mainly reds, and you know I don't love reds, man. You know, but there was a rosé that saved the day. It was delightful. And he tells me about this girl, Emily, that we used to kick it with. It was actually the first pair of boobs that I ever touched.
It's the wrong details. It's the wrong.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the story.
Get to the point.
How many people do you know that tell stories like this?
Yeah, I know a few.
I know a few. One of them is a very close member of my family who I absolutely adore, but does not know the right details for the story or which order to put them in.
Yeah.
We whip pan back to the wine tasting, and now we hear Luis's voice coming out of this other guy.
He tells me that she's working as a housekeeper now, right? And she's dating this dude, Carlos, who's a shot caller from across the bay.
And now we whip from there to this barbecue where we see the girl that she's talking about who also speaks in Luis's voice.
And she tells him about the dude that she's cleaning for, right? That he's like this big shot CEO that is all retired now, but is loaded.
And then we go to this softball game where we see this other guy who says,
yo, man, this guy's got a big ass safe just sitting in the basement, just chilling.
It's so great. He brings it to life in such ways that you wouldn't even need the visuals of it, but the visuals just add on to what he's already doing and accentuate what he's already doing to make this such a fantastic sequence. And it's fascinating because there's little clues about the story he's telling because of where they set these conversations. You know, I think it's really important to see where these conversations are being set. The softball field makes all sense. But then when he's talking to his other male cousin, they're sitting at a kind of a slightly high-end restaurant and they're sitting having this conversation. So you're like, wait, what? You're sitting at this restaurant having this conversation? Fascinating. So there's little things that I think even add on to what Peña's already delivering in his performance.
well, and this is why I say that this is what breaks the cliche. He's at a wine tasting with his cousin discussing a big crime job and also the first person whose boobs he touched. And that he likes rosés, but isn't a fan of reds. I mean, all that stuff is like, makes this human and unique.
Yes, agreed.
And now we whip through each of these characters really fast.
Of course, I asked him, did Emily tell Carlos to tell you to get to me what kind of safe it was? And he says, nah, dog. All she said is that it's like super legit and whatever's in it, it's gotta be good.
I love Michael Peña. I'll just keep saying it. It's so and what's so funny, which you're not hearing this, but John is hearing this, which is sort of my impression of how Michael Peña delivers these lines, which I'm going to assume is sad and very white. But that's kind of what it is.
It's part of the game. Yeah. It's when I do the imitations as well. It's, we're never quite hitting the heights that these guys do, but it's fun to talk about it.
Well, and you and I each have a wheelhouse. There are things that I can get closer to than other things.
100% agreed. Yeah.
But what is funny about it is he has such a unique rhythm that I can't, as I'm reading these lines to you, I can't read them without taking on some of that rhythm because it's just so infectious, I think.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
And now we go into the montage, the prep montage And we got some Commodores playing, and we see a laundry guy drop off uniforms. We're looking at Max. We've got electronics tools. We're stealing license plates. And they actually had a much longer way of breaking in this house. There's a whole deleted scene of Scott dressed up as the cable guy, and they had cut the cable to get into the house first to prep for some stuff, and they decided they didn't need any of it. We've cut the landlines. We're ready to break in. It's a big, beautiful, classic San Francisco Victorian house.
Hey, if the job goes bad, you know I got your back, right?
Don't worry. It's not gonna happen.
Scott is very confident. We see him run up and jump over a wall, parkour style. Everyone's very impressed.
Ooh.
He gets into the house. He goes downstairs, sees this lock, and the lock's got a fingerprint reader. And he goes back upstairs, and now we get to see a cool little trick where with some tape and some chemicals and some heat, he pulls a fingerprint off a doorknob and manages to make a fingerprint to get through the lock. All very fun. I love heist stuff like this.
Yeah, me too.
And then he opens up the door, sees this giant safe, and this is a big-ass, old-school, serious steel safe.
It's a Carbondale. It's from 1910. Made from the same steel as the Titanic.
Here's what's interesting about that.
Yeah.
The cinematographer on this film, Russell Carpenter, is the cinematographer from Titanic.
Nice.
This is Academy Award-winning cinematographer. He also shot Hard Target, True Lies, Charlie's Angels, and both Avatar movies. So this is a very established cinematographer.
I think someday, as a fun watch-along, me and you got to do Hard Target. I mean, as one day,
sure,
that would be so much fun, man. Wilford Brimley with a terrible Cajun accent, Van Damme. I mean, yeah, directed by John Woo. Is so good. Anyway,
I saw that in the movie theater at Comic-Con.
Oh,
I
nice.
went. I'm almost certain that I saw it. I think so. I think I saw it with my buddies in the 90s, early Comic-Con.
Can you crack it?
Well, here's the thing. It doesn't do so well in the cold. Remember what that iceberg did?
Yeah, man, it killed DiCaprio.
Killed everybody. Not to kill the old lady. She still threw the jewel into the oceans.
Which is all funny considering the guy filming it is the guy who shot all that.
Exactly.
So he grabs a bunch of chemicals, starts drilling, and he pours water into this thing and throws the chemicals into it, and he freezes it. It busts this big steel safe apart, bolts go flying. He's put down an air mattress to catch the door, which falls, and everything is perfect, goes into the safe, and it is empty.
There's nothing here.
What'd you say?
It's a suit.
What?
It's an old motorcycle suit.
There's no cash, no jewelry, nothing?
No, it's a bust.
We stare at the suit for a really long time, and then we see an ant with a tiny little camera watching him from a distance, and we cut to Hank in a security room who's been watching all of this. Cut to a very cute little lamb being led into a lab.
I thought we were using mice.
What's the difference?
Oof. I don't know. I'm kind of with him on this, actually. I'm like, we're killing an animal. Like, how do we come up with standards of which animals it's okay to kill and which animals are not okay to kill?
Well, I think it's good to look at the situation, right? And that is like, well, he's doing it in service of his own selfish desire for advancement financially and fame-wise, not for the betterment of humanity.
Well, I totally agree with that, but if he killed a mouse, it's a ridiculous thing that we don't need to go into. But how we determine which animals are okay to kill is a complicated issue that we will not be going into detail on the Cine-Files.
But in our other show, which we're going to do soon about.
Yeah, we'll be launching the Animal World Care Empathy podcast. We'll talk a lot about it.
The AWCEP. Absolutely.
Commence experiment 34C, organic atomic reduction.
Darren, maybe we should think.
Shrinking organic tissue is the centerpiece of this technology. I can't go to the buyers with half a breakthrough.
And he starts the process. They aim the machine at it. It zaps it. Hey, pile of goo, just like Frank.
Experiment 34C results negative. Sanitize the workstation, bring in subject 35C.
So we're going to kill another cute little lamb. Yeah. By the way, any guesses on what the caterer served at lunch this day?
I would imagine lamb. No?
Lamb chops.
Ew.
No one knew if it was on purpose or not, but that's definitely what happened. We cut to Scott. He opens up the bag. He pulls out the suit.
So weird.
And now he's got his little electro equipment because we know he's an electrical engineer. He's kind of testing things. And then we close that medicine cabinet door to reveal the reflection of Scott, who's now put on the suit. He backs up towards the tub, but he can't quite see himself. So now he gets all the way in the tub and he sees the buttons on his hands and pushes those buttons and shrinks, falls to the bottom of the tub. And now we see our first of the miniature photography. I think this is one of the things that really makes this movie is how great the miniature photography is.
I agree. It's so believable, and it, although it plays for laughs at times, it's still well done to the point where, yes, I'm laughing, but I'm also amazed at how well they've brought you into this point of view.
Well, and this is really we mentioned Honey, I Shrunk the Kids from the late 80s. And most of the technology in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids involved building really big sets. So if you wanted to build, a pull cap from a can, you built a 10-foot size pull cap. And then you had normal people walking around those sets. This is way more complicated. Yeah. So yes, there is CG, but a lot of it isn't. So what they did was they built really small sets and used macro photography with lenses and cameras that are super small to move through actually these real spaces. So they filmed all of that. They filmed their actors in front of green screen. They filmed their actors with motion capture, both with the real actors and with stuntmen. And then they also did photography passes on all the locations where what they did was they moved through them both, if I understand it correctly, with film going horizontally and film going vertically so that they have both axes. So you have a film that's, moving through this space normally, and then you have one that's tilted 90 degrees so that then they could use all of the footage. A lot of it was still photography. So they're taking footage after footage after footage, and that allows them to create a fully 3D space made with the macro photography actually shot in the grass, in the bottom of a bathtub, in the toy area, all these locations, they filmed all the real stuff.
Wow.
So then they're going to composite all these things together, the motion capture along with the macro photography, along with the stuff shot in front of green screens. And then the other thing, and this is really critical, they always wanted things in the frame for scale, and in particular things floating in the air, little dust motes and little bits of smoke and things like that. So there's always multiple dimensionality. So you see more stuff that gives you that sense of reality. And I think they totally, totally sell it.
Yeah, and I agree with you. They do totally sell it.
Yeah. So he shrunk down in this tub that now looks absolutely huge.
The world sure seems different from down here, doesn't it, Scott?
What? Who said that?
And we hear giant footsteps as Luis comes into the bathroom, opens up the curtain in the tub, and we go, oh no. And here's a good place, by the way, to see all the dust that's in the air and how that really sells the size gag.
It's a trial by fire, Scott, or in this case, water.
Luis turns up the spigot and a tidal wave of water comes towards him. And again, this is what they had to figure out. They shot water flowing at every different frame rate, at every different lensing to try to get the one that looked right from this scale.
Right.
And the water is so powerful, it actually knocks him out of the tub. And I love, too, that we see the clothes start to come down. And he goes, oh, I don't want to see this. He falls through the floor, bounces off some pipes, and then lands on a spinning record where he's holding on to the groove to keep him from going flying. And all of a sudden, we're like in a rave or something that's going on in the middle of the day in this building in the Tenderloin. It seems a bit crazy. The EDM hits. He's running through the dance floor with all the high heels and foots and falls down through another grate, through a pipe, lands on the carpet and gets sucked up into a vacuum cleaner where, again, you can see the dust flying around. He pops out of the bag. He hears a roar, and there is a giant rat. It charges him. He runs, jumps on the rat trap, which shoots him out, crashes through the window, lands on a car, immediately expands, and the driver in the car looks up and goes, "What the hell?" And that, of course, is Garrett Morris.
Yep. Original member of the first ever SNL cast. Yeah.
And do you know why Garrett Morris makes this appearance in Ant-Man?
Yeah, I have no idea. It was such an odd cameo.
It is an odd one, and the reason is that the first filmed appearance of the character of Ant-Man took place on Saturday Night Live with Garrett Morris playing Ant-Man and John Belushi as the Hulk and Dan Aykroyd as Superman.
Yes. I've watched that sketch a million times. It didn't even occur to me that.
Me neither.
Right. That's right. Oh,
and we hear as he opens up the mask, just totally stunned.
Not bad for a test drive. Keep the suit. I'll be in touch.
No, thank you. Scott packs up the suit. He gets in his cat burglar outfit. He returns the suit to the safe. He jumps out of the house, and he's instantly surrounded by cops, and we hear,
You are under arrest!
No, I didn't steal anything. I was returning something I stole.
So, John.
Yeah.
The whole point for Scott Lang was that he was not going back to a life of crime, that he loved his daughter so much that he would do anything to be in her life. And then in order to get enough money to see her, he decided to commit one more crime. And now he's going to have to go back to jail.
Yeah. And it's a conundrum because he clearly could have waited if he had found another job 377 days. That's what he wrote on his paper. I think it's 377. But no, he looked at it and was like, I don't want to wait that long. I want to establish a relationship with my daughter if I pay this stuff off. And I don't understand the logic. You make this money, you steal this thing and whatever, and then you're going to pay her the child support that you owe, and she's not going to ask any questions about where you got it. And her policeman, new boyfriend, isn't going to ask any questions about where he got it. So it's a bit of a flawed logic that he's following here. And so when it blows up in his face, it's correct that it should blow up in his face. So to me, I like that they chose to go this route with the decision that he made. They don't let him off the hook.
Well, and I think at this moment where Scott Lang is very much on the hook is a good time to end part one of our exploration of Ant-Man. Of course, we'd love to hear what you think. You can just do a search for the Cine-Files on Facebook. It's Cine_Files on Twitter, the Cine-Files podcast on Instagram. And of course, the best place to join in this conversation would be on patreon.com/the Cine-Files, where you can listen to our Cine-Files shorts. We just released one on Sinners, and you can also listen to our watch-alongs, join our advisory board. The shorts and ad-free version of the show are also available on Apple Podcasts if you're an Apple person. And that's a great place to subscribe to the Cine-Files, as is Spotify or YouTube. And really all the podcast platforms are great places. We'd love your reviews on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Comments on Spotify and YouTube are fantastic. You can buy or stream Ant-Man along with every other film we've ever reviewed at cinephiles.net. And if you want to reach me, it's SR Morris on Twitter and SR Morris1 on Instagram. John, how would folks reach you?
Yeah, you can always reach me at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and Threads, and my YouTube channel. If you want to see more film content and conversations about entertainment, head on over to the Outlaw Nation, youtube.com/John Rocha Says there on YouTube. Thanks.
And that's it for this week, and we'll be back next week to continue our exploration of Ant-Man right here on the Cine-Files.